Sep woke up in her soft mattress with a hard headache. It was going to be one of those days. One of those days that, just when she thought she had enough to deal with, something else would pop up to wag its finger in her face and say, "Oh, and this too." Sep had noticed that it always seemed to be one of those days whenever she woke up with a headache. It was like some weird internal sixth sense telling her that her day was going to suck. She wouldn't know when it would happen, but something extra stressful would come up, and it was waiting just around the corner. And when Sep heard a very tired and hoarse-sounding little girl quietly call out, "Mom," from around the corner of her bedroom, she knew that today's stress pop-up wasn't waiting around. Sep sat up in bed and looked at her very tired and very sick daughter Ember, who had just entered the room, and Sep immediately felt the stress bomb drop on her. Today was probably the worst day for one of her kids to get sick. Even though Sep was pretty much 100% sure it was something serious, there was this hope that maybe Ember just had a mild case of the sniffles and she would still be able to send her to school. But any ounce of that hope vanished the moment she felt her daughter's head. Ember had a fever, and not a mild one either. Sep gently ran her hand through her daughter's hair and told her to come and lie down in her bed. All the while, a million thoughts ran through Sep's mind of what she was going to do. It was vital that she go to work today, so as much as she didn't want to, she was going to have to call her mom and have her look after Ember for the day. And as for her son, right as the thought entered her head, as if on cue, a little boy with way too much energy for 7 o'clock in the morning ran into the room and jumped into bed as he did every morning. Who needs alarm clocks when you have kids? The somewhat amusing, if not sarcastically tiresome thought quickly left Sep's mind when she realized that on top of work and her sick daughter, she still had to get her son ready for school. "Ty," she began, but the little boy, who had already all but buried himself into the fluffy blankets, interrupted her with, "T! My name's T, remember?" Oh, that's right. How could she forget her son's self-imposed nickname at a time like this? Sep sighed. "T, your sister is very sick," and the moment T heard the word sick, he immediately popped his head out of the blanket and looked at his sister like she was a biohazard, before jumping out of bed and pointing at Ember. "Gah! Get away from me, you cretin!" "Cretin? Where did you even Look, T, listen to me." Sep took a breath and looked at her son, who was still in pointing at a cretin mode, and realized that the whole explanation she was about to give him was going to be pointless, so instead she just let the breath back out. "Just go get ready for school, okay?" "Okay." And with that, T dropped his pointing finger and ran to his room. Sep gave her daughter a last kiss on the forehead before getting out of bed, tying up her robe, swiping her phone to call her mom, and heading to the kitchen to make food, all the while her headache pounded away like a drum. Yep, it was definitely one of those days. The phone rang all the way to voicemail. Sep sighed and then took a few minutes to assemble the ingredients for dinner. She had already made today's breakfast and lunch the night before, so now she needed to get dinner cooking in the slow cooker so it would be ready by 6 o'clock. Thinking ahead was practically the meaning of life for Sep. Once she had assembled everything, she tried recalling her mom, but was once again greeted with the answering machine. And that was when it hit her. She took a glance at the calendar just to be sure, and the number stared back at her in confirmation. Her mom was away visiting her brother, and she wasn't going to be back for another week. This wasn't just one of those days. This was a test day. A day when Sep knew her life would poke and prod her to see just how much she could take. She needed to go to work today, but she also needed to stay home with Ember. The inability to find a good solution swirled in Sep's head right along with her headache as she continued with the morning routine. T poked some fun at his mom, saying, "Uh-oh, Mom's got the blank face again," when he walked into the kitchen for breakfast. The blank face was the expression that Sep had inadvertently developed as a result of not wanting to frighten her kids whenever she was practically panicking on the inside. After she was finished with the morning routine and T got on the bus to go to school, Sep checked how Ember was doing, and it seemed her fever wasn't getting any worse at the moment, but at this point it could go either way. Sep didn't have any time to make a decision, so as horrible as she felt for doing so, she told her daughter that she would have to go for a little while, and instructed Ember on how to contact her if she started feeling any worse at all. And after a kiss on the forehead and a reminder to not go anywhere, Sep walked out into the rain, with her headache, panic, and now guilt all carrying along with her. It was bad enough to leave a 7-year-old child at home alone, but to leave one who's sick with a fever would be considered despicable if most any of the other mothers in their neighborhood heard about it. And that's exactly how Sep felt, but she couldn't see what else to do. Today was or else day at work. Basically, if Sep didn't show up today, then there wouldn't be any point in showing up tomorrow. She had already used up all of her sick days and then some. She often had to miss meetings or skip out of work early because of her kids' needs. And the bottom line was, her boss was just about fed up with her. And she honestly couldn't really blame him. The job she had was just wrong for her. It was much too time-demanding for someone in Sep's situation. She only took the job due to a lack of options at the time and a need to make ends meet for her and her kids. But she had been trying to find a new job from day one to no avail. It was a choice between the assured well-being of her daughter for the next few hours, or for the assured well-being and security for both of her kids for days, weeks, or possibly months to come. Both choices sucked, and Sep felt sucky for choosing. There wasn't any way that she could possibly convince herself that she made the right decision, because either one was wrong. But the least she could do now that she had made a decision was to not get fired today and just pray that Ember's illness wouldn't get any worse. The rain was coming down hard, making the drive slow, and it only came down harder and harder as Sep got closer to work. By the time she reached the office, it was an all-out downpouring thunderstorm. But the weather was the last thing on Sep's mind as she went about her day, doing her absolute best to meet the day's workload and then a little extra. Things were going surprisingly smoothly for the first half of the day. But at around noon, Sep was reminded that it was still a test day. She was sitting in a meeting when she felt her phone buzz in her pocket. Her heart thumped as she dearly hoped it wasn't Ember. But with her boss sitting right next to her, there was no way she could interrupt the meeting to pick up her phone. She had told Ember to call multiple times if she didn't pick up right away, so Sep just sat there listening to her heartbeat as her phone stopped ringing, and then waited to see if it would start again. But after a good 5 minutes of no buzzing, Sep finally relaxed a little more and took a breath. She almost had her mind completely focused back on the meeting when something caught her eye. The meeting room had a glass wall that connected to a common area. As Sep looked out the glass towards some couches, she saw a small television that was turned on to the local news. They were talking about the heavy thunderstorm that was going on outside. And as soon as Sep saw the words at the bottom of the screen saying that the schools in her district, including her son's school, declared an early release due to possible localized flooding that would happen later in the day, Sep stood up from her chair, abruptly interrupting the meeting. She looked around the room for a moment as they all stared at her. Then she just looked at her boss, who was giving her a warning look. She paused for another few moments as she realized what was going to happen. Then just simply said, "I'm sorry," and hurried out the door. She whipped out her phone and saw that it was the school that had called her in the meeting, telling her to pick up her son. There was also a new email, but she couldn't care less about that right now. She called the school back as she ran to her car through the rain. Once she knew everything was fine and that T was safe, she made sure to calm herself down, as much as that was possible, before starting the drive. When Sep pulled up to the school, it was packed with cars and parents looking for their children, but Sep didn't have any trouble finding her little boy. T had taken the liberty to drawing a big black letter T on his bright red umbrella, which made him stand out of the crowd of little kids huddling on the front steps. Even in the midst of all the worry and commotion, Sep still couldn't help but feel a moment of pride at how clever her little boy was, even if the umbrella was now pretty much ruined as the permanent marker was starting to bleed and wash off slightly. Once they were both packed into the car, Sep gave a moment to give her son a little squeeze before heading home. The drive was filled with T's chatter as he excitedly talked about the chaos that was going on at school as though it was the coolest experience ever. Normally Sep would have been slightly annoyed at the non-stop chatterbox that was her son, but right now it was the most comforting sound in the world. The moment they got through the door, Sep immediately went to check on Ember, and the moment she did, she finally felt a sense of relief, but also a familiar sense of guilt. Ember had all but barricaded herself in the blankets of her mother's bed, with many of her stuffed animals all around her. Ember hated thunderstorms. They always scared her, and now she had been home alone during one for hours, and on top of that, she had a fever. Sep went over to the bed and gently wrapped her arms around the blob of blankets that she assumed was Ember, until a little head popped out, and soon 2 little arms wrapped themselves around Sep. At least it seemed Ember's fever had gone down a bit, thought Sep. She apologized to Ember for being away as she climbed into the bed next to her daughter. Ember said it was fine and that she, as she put it, didn't cry once. Sep smiled and told her that it was okay to cry when she was scared. But Ember just stubbornly shook her head, saying that crying was for babies. Sep almost wanted to say that that would then make herself a big baby, but she internally voted against it, and just hugged her daughter as the thunder boomed outside. Within a few moments they heard a loud pop, and out went the lights. Of course they had to lose power. The Murphy's Law of test days was undeniable. Ember squeezed Sep tighter but didn't say anything. Then soon T came running in the room with flashlights, declaring, "Blackout! Blackout!" Sep had to remind her son, as she did every time the power went out, to not run around in the dark, but T just yeah-okayed her and jumped into bed. He handed Ember one of the 2 flashlights and challenged her to play Flashlight Wars. As much as Sep was still worried sick about what was going to happen to them now that she was for sure getting fired, as she watched her kids play, she knew that she would figure it out. It might not be pretty, might be hard on all of them, but as long as they were together, she would find a way to pull them through. She always had. At least her gosh darn headache was finally gone, it seemed. Then suddenly T decided that 2 flashlights were not enough for 3 people. And even though Sep tried to convince T that 2 were more than enough, the boy was insistent that he go get another one for his mom. But for the sake of preventing her son from possibly getting hurt, because she knew he would run in the dark again, she just told him that her phone had a flashlight. As she pulled it out, she remembered the email she had dismissed earlier. She checked it again and saw that apparently it was sent to her early in the morning, but she was just too busy that she hadn't checked her phone until that time in the afternoon. After a few minutes of reading, Sep's expression changed from curious to surprised to disbelief to joy. And as much as she wanted to jump out of bed in victory, she figured maybe showing her kids mom's giddy joy wasn't much better than showing them mom's panic. Security was what she needed to show them. Like, every day was the same as the last. There were no big outside forces that could control mom's life. It was something they would have to learn eventually, but not yet. Not yet. Still, she couldn't help but smile as she asked her kids to settle down for a bit so she could tell them something. "So, I know today wasn't the best of days, especially for you, Ember. I should have been with you today. I'm sorry." Sep stroked her daughter's hair. "But," she continued, "perhaps this will make it up for you, and for T. From now on, Mom's going to go to school with you guys." Both of the kids looked at each other and then back at their mom with cocked heads and a unanimous, "What?" Sep explained that their school needed a new teaching assistant, and they asked her to come. Her new job was going to be at the same school Ember and T went to, and that also meant that they would all leave home at the same time and go home together at the same time. No more bus rides or aftercare programs, and they would finally be able to be with Mom a little more often. And with that, the kids jumped up in excitement and tackled Sep. Despite Ember's sickness and fear of the raging thunderstorm outside, she was full of energy. She looked up at Sep and said, "Thanks, Mom," through a big smile. The little details about that email was that Sep had applied for a job at their school ages ago, but they were only getting back to her now because the teaching assistant had to leave unexpectedly, and they needed someone to fill the spot promptly. The job paid less than they were accustomed to, and there wasn't a guarantee she would have the job for very long. But Sep's dream job was to be a teacher. It was what she went to college for once upon a time. If she was able to get into the school, then if she worked hard, maybe she had a shot at moving up to becoming a full teacher. And until then, she had some savings that would help ends meet. Things weren't going to get much easier. As much as Sep wished a miracle would just fall in her lap and make her life easy, or at least not as much of a stress ball as it was, that wasn't how things worked for someone like her. But they say life gives you as much as you can handle. And if that's true, then she was just glad that she was able to handle the 2 bundles of joy jumping on her bed right now. Because it was those smiles that made all the test days in the world worth it.
Aww.
Hello, I'm Zaccura, and thank you for listening to my story of September. If you're new here, then this is part 9 in a currently ongoing series I'm doing for the year of 2018, where every month I attempt to create a character based off of that month, as well as write a little story for them. You just listen to September's story, and I'll have the playlist with the rest of the story videos linked up in the card, as well as in the description box, so if you'd like to give them a look-see, you can. But for now, it's time to move on to the chatty bit for this month's video. And like I did last month, I'm going to try to keep this pretty short, emphasis on try, but unlike last month, it's not because I had issues with the story. Well, I mean, I still do. I can't not have issues with these things. There's always something that I'm not 100% happy with, but really, I'm just going to try and keep it short because the story was already like 14 minutes long, and I don't want to make this video too atrociously long, though that's inevitable. So, the inspiration. There were actually 3 words or meaning phrase thingies, I still don't know what they're called, for the month of September, and they were shrewdness, love, and clear thinking. And the moment I saw that, I was like, is that not a mom right there? I mean for real, I think I was onto something here. Plus, with this series, I am trying to be pretty diverse with the lives of the characters. Basically, I'm trying to make them all very different. They all have different personalities and lives and thus different struggles, but also trying to have them all be very real, like as if they could all exist in the real world, which by the way is like, it's been hard to come up with so far 9 completely different people, especially because having characters that exist in the real world is pretty limiting, actually, because I can't just pull like some funky sci-fi stuff to create interesting characters. They just have to be really based off of something really normal, and yeah. But anyway, I figured having at least one of these characters be a parent would be an interesting addition, because it is a type of life that is fairly normal, but definitely has its own plethora of struggles, I'm sure. And it was a little bit difficult to write because as someone who is not a parent, I feel like being a parent is probably something that one doesn't really fully understand until they are one themselves. So I really just had to rely on what I've observed and just guess, I guess. And I mean, that is the role of a writer, right? Guessing. Because you can't ever really fully understand a person unless you've had the same experiences. So in order to write characters that are very different, you have to just take the time to try and understand all kinds of people and put yourself in their shoes, and then just make the best guess that you can. And you don't get it right all the time, but that's the best that you can do. But this story was definitely different than the others because there were 0 flashbacks on Sep's life. And that was done on purpose, because with the other stories, they were really about the whole emotional growth of the main character. Even though the stories had something going on in the present, which is where the physical aspect of the story came from, it was really about their whole life journey of getting to where they are at the end of the story. But with Sep, I wanted to create a more of a day in the life sort of thing. Sort of like her journey of emotional growth has already brought her to where she is right now. And now, let's see the everyday struggles and difficulties that she has to deal with. There were certainly a few unanswered questions, like, where's the father? What happened to that guy? What's Sep's actual story, if you will? What was her life like that brought her to where she is? And, well, those questions are going to have to stay unanswered, or rather left up to you guys to fill in the gaps, because, you know, there's a little bit here and there that hinted at Sep's past. Overall, this story is actually one of my personal favorites that I've written in this series, and really that's just because of how much happens in it, like physically happens in it. I guess I just really enjoy my own stories more when there's a lot of action and things going on in the present, and this story was all about stuff going on in the present, so there you go. As for the illustration, lots of issues. So the colors for the month were just deep blue and brown, and the flowers for the month were aster and morning glories, both of which do come in blue, but no brown. flowers aren't brown. I mean, I tried to add some to the center of the aster flowers, but there's a lot of blue going on. Especially because the gemstone for the month is sapphire, which is deep blue, obviously. So it's a bit of a mess with how much deep blue there is going on in this illustration. I tried to make the two flowers slightly different blue, but they ended up looking fairly similar. Also, I am not very happy with how the footage for the video came out. Things were just not happening when it came to filming this video. The first half has lousy, not bright daylight lighting, and then the rest of it is lousy desk lamp lighting because it was dark and I still needed to film. And combine that with the fact that my camera holder was like literally going haywire on me at some point. It was just not a great day, or days actually, because I filmed this over the course of 2 days for filming. Also, I just don't like coloring at night because I don't have proper light bulbs, so it's very difficult to get the colors true to what I want because the lighting changes the appearance. But it could have been worse. And overall, it's a pretty okay illustration. It looks good on the wall. Oh yes, and the zodiac signs for the month are Virgo and Libra. Now as for the names, okay, now I know for this entire time, y'all have probably been like, Sep, that's the extent of your creativity for naming? And, well, yes it is. There are like 0 names out there that start with Sep other than September, and I did not feel like naming her September, but guess what, y'all? Sep is actually a name for a girl. It's a real name. Confirmed from some baby name website that I clicked on back when I was doing research that I don't remember the name of. It was very legit. Trust me on that. Then for the other characters, I named the daughter Ember, so we have Sep and Ember, and then all that was missing was the letter T. So I nicknamed the son T, and all together we have Sep T Ember. And what was the full name of T, you may ask? You guys will never know. And that brings me to the end of this month's video. Not even going to mention that I barely made it, because that should already be assumed by now. But I do plan on focusing on the next 3 stories during October, because I plan on making a book and a calendar with all these stories and illustrations at the end of the year, and so I will need to have all the stories and illustrations finished before then. It's exciting, I know, but stressful because I'm gonna try to do Inktober again this year as well, so we'll see how Zaccura's next month will go. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell so you don't miss out on all that. If you enjoyed this video in any way, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to follow me on social media, all the links to that are in the description box where you can follow me for daily updates, and until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!